Hi, I'm Graham from Match Medics and welcome to our podcast, Doctor Diaries Adventures to Ireland, where each week we have a doctor come on to tell us their own personal story about relocating to Ireland. Ryan, thank you for joining us this morning on our podcast, Doctor Diaries Adventures to Ireland.
Thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, and I guess it's your Irish roots that brought you here initially. Let's start there. However many years ago we started our conversation, you're here, close to 3 years now. Let's go back to those Irish roots and what brought you here in the first place.
So my mum was born just outside of Belfast, in Bangor, and growing up, I always knew kind of that there was this other place far away that I was connected to, I suppose, I suppose also my sort of dad's family being Scottish, it was kind of growing up in South Africa had a bit of an identity thing.
Sure.
We have a public holiday called Heritage Day. And I would obviously sort of wear my South African colours, but sort of also want to try and include the Irish and all the rest as well. So always knew there was a connection that I was going to have to explore as I got older and became a bit more independent. So yeah, definitely was always going to be a stop for me.
Awesome. You mentioned your colours in Heritage Day. Have to ask the big question, obviously being a Safa, on game day, who are we cheering on? Is it the Bucks or is the boys in green?
I would say Bucks first, still, always will be, but it's been nice to sort of rally behind another team now quite passionately, I must say, and It's got quite heated in a couple of the pubs that we've stopped in where the two have played against one another, but it's been a good competition that I've enjoyed and a good rivalry, so
awesome.
Continue to enjoy that.
At least we can agree that we'll be cheering on either team when they're going up against England.
Oh, absolutely,
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can't argue over that.
Coming from South African, Irish and Scottish heritage, I think I was sort of genetically hardwired to cheer against the English. So absolutely.
Awesome. Well, look, let's go back to the beginning of the journey then, and let's talk about sort of the initial motivations for the move. Because I know when we first chatted, you then very quickly started to press pause because it just wasn't the right time, and then we revisited it. Why then was it second time round the right time for you and your wife to come over?
I suppose exactly that. There was a couple of things kind of that needed to come together. I completely underestimated. I think you had warned me, but I still underestimated the length of time that sort of the documentation and the processing would take. For my wife in particular, her degree wasn't recognised here, and we didn't sort of anticipate, because it's not a very well sort of trodden path, kind of how long it would take for her to get her degree recognised and her qualifications converted over. So there's a number of things that sort of played into it like that, the costs of converting her degree, and obviously...
Remind me again her background.
She's a vet,
Okay.
Trained in sort of in South Africa, and a lot of South African vets go to the UK for a couple of years. There's quite a well-worn pathway that in that regard,
okay.
But Ireland not so commonly. So she had to sort of do a lot of very particular kind of logging of her training and things like that, and providing of evidence. So there was a lot of backwards and forwards between the university she trained at and kind of the guys this side to show them that she had done a lot of what was required. So a couple of I'd say maybe the paperwork and bureaucracy kind of slowed us down a lot more than I anticipated. I think when we initially spoke and I was sort of finishing up my ComServe, actually I think we'd spoken before that when I was in my internship, and you kind of given me the lowdown on how it worked so I could start to prepare. And then kind of reaching the end of my ComServe, I was excited and ready to go, and then didn't realise how long this was going to take. So
Sure.
Definitely a warning for anyone getting involved. Start early, get the documentation done early, long before you think you're even going to need it.
Absolutely, and that's a really good takeaway for anyone, whether in South Africa or Malaysia or across Europe or wherever it might be. It is a long old journey, and there is a lot of paperwork involved. I think from when we first spoke to now, whenever we're speaking to new doctors, whenever our team might be speaking to new doctors, we are overhamming that piece now because it is a headache, but it will test that motivation to make the move across. I'd like to, before we jump into your first job here, delve into your wife's piece a little bit more, because that traveling spouse, as we call it, is quite an important piece of the puzzle too, because it's quite simple to get a doctorate job here, but then other professions might need to, like your wife, go through a sort of pre-qualifying criteria in order to have their profession recognised here, or their qualifications recognised here. How long did that take for your wife to get that?
I would say on just under probably a year, 9 months to a year in total.
Okay.
It wasn't quick at all. But I suppose on South African side, a lot of the bureaucratic processes can be quite slow.
Sure.
So I think that didn't help, but it took a long time. We're talking about a year worth of kind of planning, documentation, the backwards and forwards between the South African side of things, and then eventually the side as well. So probably about a year.
Okay.
And I think what also was, which didn't count in her favor, was it wasn't a critical skills, which I think a large number of professions are going to face. It's not a critical skills, and that has its own kind of caveats in terms of you need to have work agreed upon before you move. You need to, and that also then requires kind of having an employer who's ready to take you on board and then sit tight while you're getting the paperwork done, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And she was very lucky. I suppose she earned it. She sort of got a good job, interviewed well, and they were prepared to wait for her and the skills that she was going to bring across. So that helped a lot. But it was, I would say 9 months towards a year of paperwork and
now thoroughly enjoying her job here as a vet.
Oh, absolutely. Going from strength to strength. She worked at a practice she absolutely loved, sort of fell in love with all her colleagues, made some good mates right off the bat, and
awesome.
She's actually now, I suppose quite a young age, taken on the role of clinical director, which in her career clinically is quite it's almost sort of the clinical ceiling that she could go to if she's not going to specialize, which she's still thinking about. So no, she's gone from strength to strength in her career. So
amazing. And
watch
as
the
of
space.
you, and we'll go through your journey and where you are today in a bit. But let's start then where your career started here in Ireland, and that was as an emergency medicine SHO in Connolly Hospital in North Dublin. Talk us through that in your first day. What was that? We're always big on the culture shock, especially for South Africans coming across. It is quite a different system. Talk us through your experience.
Absolutely. I'd say right off the bat, I love my time at Connolly. I love my colleagues. I think that was refreshing. I come from a very isolated community service in South Africa, which a lot of the guys will know about, and they're known to be quite tough. And being isolated and then landing in a sort of city centre ED with consultants who were as much part of the team as were all the junior guys, it was phenomenal. That was refreshing, really, really cool. First day arriving, kind of having access to what I required on time was quite a cool experience and a nice level to practice at, if that makes sense. And a bit of a change of pace, which was from a lot of disaster management, which I'd kind of been practicing before, I suppose, and trying to sort of judiciously use whatever resources we had, to sort of having access to the resources and not having an excuse to not using them, if that makes sense. And that was very refreshing. Brought across, I'd like to think some really good emergency skills, especially sort of on the practical side of things, but also came across and practiced a different kind of more medicine focused and less trauma focused emergency this side, which was great for me to find new places I needed to improve my knowledge and kind of learn in that. So that was a good experience. And day one, just sort of being welcomed into the team and sort of having all of that realization upon me was quite exciting, I must say.
Yeah. And a lot of particularly South Africans will be able to relate to this, as you mentioned, sort of disaster medicine or sort of firefighting in quite a resource poor environment, and then coming to, by comparison, quite a resource rich environment. How did you find then mixing with Irish colleagues who would have a gripe, who would have perhaps a challenge with the system? And it's before you answer that one, I think it's probably best to frame no system's perfect, and there are certainly gaps in every system. But coming from somewhere with limited resources and you're having to think on your feet and firefight, to a much more established and in this case adult only emergency medicine department, how did you find that other culture shock?
I suppose it was a new perspective for me to kind of look at the way I practice medicine, and that was quite interesting. It challenged the way I was practicing before, which is, I think it gave me a new level at which I could think about my practice of medicine. Sort of not what have I got to use, but kind of what could I go looking for to add to this case, if that makes sense, that we have access to? What more can we do, per se? And that was quite nice and refreshing. And that I got directly from a lot of my Irish colleagues. I'd say there was definitely many a funny moment watching them frustrated with sort of slow access to blood results, not sort of coming back within the hour or two that they required. Look, some of them emergent bloods are required in that time, but coming from a place that in South Africa we would sort of regularly wait a day or two, if not longer, for blood results that then became redundant. So not to sort of poo-poo where I was working before. I absolutely loved it in South Africa, but it was just quite funny to watch the new challenges, and I think also to keep an eye on myself and notice when I slowly started to change and became frustrated with the new system, forgetting where I'd come from. So
sort of a pinch me moment.
Exactly. And it was quite nice because I mean, multiple of the colleagues that I worked with at Connolly from South Africa I'd worked with before, which was quite cool. So that was quite surprising. But every now and again we'd have to touch base with ourselves and be like, remember that time at this hospital, that was what we struggled with, and now this is the new problem, and listen to us complain. So that was quite nice. It was a good way to keep ourselves in check and try to stay humble.
But stay a little bit grounded, I guess, that you can pull in a specialist from different areas within the hospital, and you're not the anaesthetist and the obs-gynae and the emergency all in one.
Exactly. And I think that was also quite different, sort of rushing in to do what we had done in South Africa in different scenarios, because you were used to being the only one, and then finding yourself having to explain why you didn't call for help. So thankfully, I mean, touch wood, nothing ever majorly went wrong, but that was also quite a new experience to have to get used to.
So quite a bit of professional development straight off the bat in jumping into that new system, both stopping yourself from your firefighting South African mode to also getting to grips with a totally new system. So I think everyone's here to be challenged, right? And I think it's a good thing, particularly in your medical career, to have something to keep you upgrading yourself and upgrading your knowledge and expertise.
I think a good way, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but exactly on the back of what you're saying there, I think one of the big things that came across for me was, in South Africa you're trained to be a generalist, and it's a generalist to manage a whole set of emergencies, plus know a fair amount of kind of the different specialities, so that you can run a generalist practice quite well at a really good level at any time of the day or night. But coming to Ireland, which was, I suppose, quite a big change as well, was being able to focus, sort of hyper-focus on emergency, and then sort of say, okay, great, this is more chronic medicine, let's offload that to the correct team, and sort of really be able to tune into your specialist practice. That is quite nice, and that's a big jump and a sort of acceleration from moving from South Africa to Ireland, I found. And that's sort of excluding the guys in South Africa who've got training posts, but I imagine it's quite a similar thing.
So Connolly was your first stop on the journey. Where to next?
Right after that, actually was Afadia. So that was the next one. So Connolly, there's an SHO and then the Reg for a short while, longer while. And there was just shy of 2 years, and then Afadia, took the job in Afadia.
So for anyone listening, can you compare, this is private emergency, can you compare this to any of the setups back home that some South Africans will be more familiar with?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say, can I? That's a good question. So Afadia is an acute care service, which would be similar to the likes of kind of the non-hospital attached, perhaps Medicrosses or Mediclinics back in South Africa, where they have the ability to provide some urgent care and high-level care, but would offload you to a hospital if you required anything more sort of needing admission or further workup. So that would be probably more similar to what Afadia and their express cares do. I'm, however, in a new sort of arm of it, where we were running what we call a minor injuries unit, which is a way for the local state emergency departments to kind of offload their minor cases. Sort of minor broken bones, cuts, scratches, small injuries that can be sort of very quickly imaged and intervened on, and then the patient's brought in or followed up through kind of rapid access clinics, really, so we can try and offload some of the burden on the EDs, peer that's the idea of it.
Okay. And what's the biggest difference between public and private patients here that you found?
I don't know that I'm that qualified to answer, unfortunately, because again, the minor injury unit that we're running is quite an interesting setup. So we're very closely monitored by the HSC NACE Hospital Emergency Department. So we see their minor injuries according to a lot of very similar to their protocols, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I would say the trickiest part managing is having patients come into us and expecting all the private kind of resources that AFADIA has access to, but through our little minor injuries unit. And then, of course, we have to go back to the HSC and sort of justify why we might have done a very high level of imaging on something that might be fairly insignificant. So it's trying to find that balance there and manage patients' expectations. So that's a bit of a trick.
Sure.
Whereas I think in public, in the emergency department, it was the majority of my patients were kind of patients just desperately glad to receive some sort of professional healthcare input on whatever they were going through, whether it was minor, whether it was major. And that was because I think patients were struggling quite a lot to get into GPs, maybe still are, and they were just relieved for the most part. A small portion of the sort of the public patients that we were experiencing there were just sort of really frustrated with sort of not having their chronic medical care met, if that makes sense. But that was a very, very small subsect. Okay.
And that's, I guess, a growing trend. Hopefully you'll be able to confirm this within emergency medicine in Ireland. It's that specialty creep. You mentioned about access to care and access to GPs in areas in the country can be quite challenging. So people would tend to then lean on the public emergency medicine system, and as a consequence of that, some then filter into the private minor injury setting. How's your experience been with that specialty creep?
It's actually a very good point to bring up, I think, especially for some of the guys in South Africa who might be looking at it, or maybe other countries as well where they practice fairly similarly. As I said earlier, we're kind of trained to be generalists, and as a result of that, a lot of guys finish their training, finish their internship in community service, and go into practicing as GPs, generalist practitioners. Whereas here, it's a specialist in and of itself. You've got to finish, do your internship, and then qualify over a period of 2 to 4 years, depending on your experience, to get into being a GP privately as well. Or sort of any sort of GP requires specialization as well. So that was a major kind of mind shift that I had to get used to. So even generalist practice here is sort of specialization. And I think on that note is that there's a lot more people, even within specializations, who are interested in doing their subspecs or subspecializations, and tend within those specializations to not see cases that they're not comfortable with. And to be fair, that is where medicine is going. We're learning more about things all the time, and it takes people being hyper-focused to be able to provide the best level of care. But at the same time, I think there is something to be said about having a contextual and holistic understanding of where your subspecialty fits into the realm of everything else, and being able to still be a little bit of a generalist at the end of the day. Okay. And I think that's why South Africans do so well here, seemingly. Yeah,
absolutely,
if I may.
Yeah. And work away and shouting out your fellow countrymen and women and their sort of settling in, adaptability, I guess, into a totally new system. And I think particularly within the private minor injury space, there is quite a high population of South African doctors operating in that space, as you say, because their experience coming across, even post-ComServe, is very similar to what is required within those settings.
Absolutely. It was quite funny as well. So first day I arrived at Connolly, like I said, 4 colleagues, South African colleagues, 3 of which I'd worked with personally before, and then of course you start getting all the referrals in from the private rapid access clinics around your hospital, and it's all South African names on the referrals as well. Yeah. So that was definitely
no escaping.
No, apparently not. I thought I was sort of unique in choosing Ireland as my base, and I arrived here and it was not the case. Yeah. But it's been great. And I excuse me. Kind of having landed and settled in, it's so easy to see why guys have come across from SA, settled in here, done well, found what they were looking for, and don't seem to be in any rush to go anywhere else.
And that's certainly been our experience too. Of course, there are some who'll come across here, give it a year, give it 18 months, and see it as just a trial, and see where the career goes from there. But the majority that we've dealt with over our sort of decade-long career within this space are now seeing Ireland as home, right?
Yeah.
Do you see Ireland as home for you, even for the foreseeable?
Yeah, I do. I think my case is maybe not as unique as I thought, but my parents have subsequently moved back this side.
Okay.
My dad's family, my granddad passed away in Scotland a couple of years ago, so my grandmom is kind of alone there. Okay. My dad wanted to be closer to her, to be able to visit. My mom wanted to move back this side for many years, and they made that move about just over a year ago. So I have my parents and my youngest brother, who still lives with them this side as well. Okay. And my middle brother is in the UK and has been there for the last 3 years practicing law. So the family is now this side. I think for me, this is definitely home. Okay. I'm in no rush to sort of venture off anywhere else, that's for sure.
Amazing. And amazing to have, and that's the wider piece as well, the ties that still keep a lot of people thinking about moving back to SA is their dependents, I guess, is their parents, is they could be in a variety of different health circumstances, or they could have cousins or younger siblings that just ultimately bring them back home. Whereas, as you say, it sounds like the whole Jardine family were quite prepared for relocating to where their ancestral roots first began.
Yeah, my parents had talked about it for many years, and for me it was never kind of a permanent move. Initially, I just wanted to always travel, and it just seemed like a good base to use as a sort of platform into Europe and the US and the UK and things like that. And then I suppose things fell into place as they needed to. And if ever there were signs that things were meant to be and we were doing the right things, it was kind of the move across, and the families as well. What I would say as well, I think what I've noticed is that guys who move across alone, who struggle to kind of break into their community, wherever they end up staying or wherever they end up working, they seem to go back more quickly, and that makes sense, kind of establish friend networks and things like that back home. I think that for a lot of people maybe is also kind of quite a scary thought when imagining yourself move to a new country and sort of starting from ground zero, so to speak. But I would say it is tricky because you come from a completely different culture, and you bring it with it nuances that you don't even know kind of are just sort of your culture's own, if that makes sense. But I think throwing yourself into getting involved, kind of work functions, outside of work, sports, I think that's where I've seen guys really settle in well, because I think that there's a lot of similarities in South African and Irish culture in terms of being active and busy and involved. And I definitely recommend for the guys considering it. That is something to bear in mind if they've got to be willing to sort of get involved, if that makes sense, when coming across.
Absolutely, and building the community and building that base.
That
Before we sort of square off the clinical side of your whole journey here, can you recall, probably one of your more interesting interactions with an Irish patient that you thought was a little bit, let's say, unusual by comparison to some of your interactions with South African patients?
I've been trying to give this some thought, and I'm sure they have been, and I suppose it might be more just kind of a general expectation for the best care that you can give, which is not a bad thing at all. You sort of, as a patient, you need to expect the best care, and as a clinician, you need to try and provide it. But I suppose in South Africa, some of the patients that I dealt with were just kind of happy to get whatever was given, if that makes sense, and not realizing that there was so much more that could be given, if that makes any sense. That was something that kind of stuck with me. Sort of a couple of funny interactions that I can remember would be being mistaken for being English.
Okay.
Yeah, funny, maybe not so funny, but definitely an interaction.
A little side dig with that
yeah.
assumption. Yeah.
And it was a psychotic patient nonetheless who was sort of mocking my accent. Very unimpressed. So swapped over to Afrikaans, and that confused him quite a bit. But for the most part, it's just been good interactions.
Great.
I've enjoyed it.
Amazing. And now you're clinical lead over the service you're currently running in Affidea. Talk us through that sort of journey from minor injuries physician to the post you're in currently.
I suppose sort of I took the job in Affidea not for I took the job because I was actually looking for a bit more free time to work on sort of personal projects. I kind of always had an interest in medical technology and software and what it could do to augment practice. And I wanted more time to put into that. And I also found that I was very quickly toying up specializing at Connolly, which is a full-time plus gig, not just for Connolly, just specializing is in and of itself takes up your life to a large extent. And I realized that I had to kind of make a choice, so took the work at Affidea, actually took it as a part-time role initially, and settled in and met a fantastic group of colleagues at the guys at the NACE clinic, and I was realizing that I was able to put in the time to my projects and the work at Affidea, and felt that I could kind of do a bit more with what was happening at Affidea. And I'd say that the unit and Affidea as a whole is kind of it's been a good platform for me to kind of explore some of those ideas, express some of those ideas, help towards a little bit of improvement. And then when the post came available, I thought it was kind of a natural chance for me to maybe try lead and show that I have hopefully a little bit more kind of leadership value to bring and quality improvement to bring to the team. So that's kind of how I put myself forward for the role, and have been doing it for the last couple of months.
Awesome. And how both of you now are climbing the ranks in your respective fields within your space. Yeah,
strangely enough, we took the roles at the same time. So initially it was a lot of friction at home, sort of, or not even, I'd say, ships passing in the night. We were seeing each other on the odd weekend. But in saying that, things have kind of settled down now, and it's actually forcing us just to try and prioritize a bit of time and leave and things like that together. So we've definitely found a way to navigate it, that's for sure.
Amazing. So now that'll sort of nicely bring us into that just life here in Ireland and how that experience has been for you. Coming back to the very beginning, what surprised you most about life in Ireland when you first arrived here with your wife?
I would say how similar the sense of humour is.
Okay.
I think South Africans, we pride ourselves in sort of being able to laugh at ourselves. And I think the Irish are similar in that way. Everyone is up for sort of a good time, willing to sort of give a jab and take one, and that was tremendous. Just a good healthy sense of humour.
Okay.
I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't as sort of similar as that, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And following that, then I guess, was there a moment where yourself and your wife thought, we've definitely made the right move now, after the numerous hurdles you had to overcome to get to where you are? Have you both thought now, like,
we've made the right choice?
Yeah,
absolutely. But I would say there's been a couple. I would say within a week after having arrived and everything kind of settling into place, we ended up at what became our local for the next 2 years, while we were staying up in Jardine, having a pint, chatting to who was then the owner, who's now subsequently sold it, but just thinking, this is tremendous. This is awesome. This is exactly what we were looking for in our travels and experience elsewhere. There was times where we've had a quiet Sunday and we've done nothing around the house, and we thought, this is great, this is what we were looking for. Or there's been times where we've done a bit of traveling, and it's kind of exactly what we were hoping for. So there's been multiple points along the journey that have been kind of like those pinch me points that you told me, just that this has been the right call.
Yeah. You mentioned about travel, and a lot of particularly younger doctors relocating here see Ireland as a great base, and thanks to some of our leading airlines here, makes it a heck of a lot more accessible to see different parts of Europe. Focusing on Ireland though, if you were to recommend somewhere to go on a weekend trip, where would that be?
I suppose it depends what you're up for. If you're looking for a trip to get away and kind of pretend the rest of the world doesn't exist, I would say the Beara Peninsula, that side of things. So Dingle's lovely, but I would say Beara is kind of a little more isolated, a little more rugged.
Sure.
And you can kind of just pack a couple of books or whatever, go there and switch off. I don't even think we had signal for a bit of the trip, which was brilliant. If you're looking for lots of stuff to do, obviously Galway was a lot of fun, and definitely keen to get that side and do it again. I didn't think that there was surfing in Ireland, but there is on the west coast. Well, there is actually on both coasts, but the west coast, sort of Donegal side of things. If you're up for a weekend of that.
Are you a surfer?
I would love to say yes. I've done it a couple of times in my life, and it's good fun. We went with friends of ours again about a year ago, and just had an absolute blast for a weekend. It was brilliant, yeah. So I suppose it depends what you're up for, but there's a lot. Wicklow kind of. The hikes and the mountain escapes, just absolutely stunning as well. So
yeah. As long as you pack for all weathers,
yes.
any day is a good day.
Yeah, that's for sure. Exactly. Like this morning, sort of pouring with rain. Look outside, sun's opening up. I thought, great, okay, that must be it. That's the cloudburst done. Leave out the door, and it absolutely poured. So I had to go back in, grab my coat, and then get going again the second time for the day. So don't go anywhere without a coat or an umbrella. That's for sure.
So it's not bad weather; it's bad,
bad
clothing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's our fallback with our unpredictable weather here in Ireland. So as long as you're prepared for that, you're set.
There's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing. That's
exactly.
It. Yeah.
I'm going to throw a couple quick fire things your way, if that's okay at this stage. Finish the sentence. I knew I belonged in Ireland when?
When I could give my colleagues and that previous partner, TP, a bit of gears about the Irish rugby, and he gave me gears about the South African rugby.
Okay.
And we could sit in the same pub that day Ireland beat South Africa. Yeah. And we sat at the same table, sharing drinks, having an absolute good crack, as they'd say. That was a moment, absolutely.
Awesome. And were you sitting with the same person when South Africa won?
I wasn't. No, I wasn't. I was actually with mates of mine on the other side of town. But my wife was there that night with some friends of ours and him. And it was a good party. So I believe.
Yeah. We equally celebrated a green win, regardless of our team not being there. As long as it was a green win, it was a win for all. And I guess, as a person, this may sound like quite a heavy question, but as a person, do you find how you've changed since you've moved here?
Yeah, I suppose that is quite a heavy question. I think it's pretty multifaceted with regards to the move to Ireland per se. I would say I definitely have. I would say my practice has changed immensely, and day on day I'm still learning, and I'm grateful for that feeling of still growing. As a person, I would say definitely it's a little bit more intangible though to kind of describe and put into words. But what I would say too is people who travel the world kind of have a worldly wisdom about them. And I think I've got an insight into how that occurs. And it's just from the variety of experiences that you have on a day-to-day basis outside of normality, i.e. South Africa, if that makes sense, or wherever you're from.
Yeah.
I think even if it's for a year, even if it's for 6 months, even if it's potentially for a lifetime, sort of travel and get out there, because there's ways that you learn about the world that make you question a lot of kind of the views that you have and you hold as absolute fact. And I think that is healthy.
Absolutely. Yeah. A bit of international perspective, right?
Absolutely, to make you question and be a bit more introspective. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you hit the nose on the point, quite strongly earlier on, in that, throwing yourself out there too is a really important piece on just getting a little bit uncomfortable in a new environment, so that you then, firmly place yourself in that environment and make the most of the adventure, the experience that you have when you come across to Ireland. That's a piece that I think many doctor will miss, and will then have that call back home, because it's the stronger community feel that perhaps they're not getting here.
It's in no way a passive process. It's entirely active from beginning to end. That is it. Every decision, everything that you do is active. You need to be sort of active in your decision making and getting involved. That's it.
Sure. I asked you ahead of time to have a flick through your phone for a picture that summed up your Irish adventure. Do you have one for us today, if you can show it to me?
I do. So it's a picture taken on the Paddy's Day that we got here. It was in a pub called the Stag's Head.
I know it well.
Ah, very good. Yeah. And we actually just ended up there to kind of escape the crowds, and kind of the Paddy's Day is
very good.
Is an absolutely sort of mad time for anyone coming across and experiencing it. And we were just, I think we were sort of so overwhelmed, we just needed to get away, grab a drink, and we ended up watching it on TV, sitting in this fantastic little pub, well, not so little, but having a pint, and the atmosphere inside was tremendous. It was absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
I think things had finally settled down from the move at that stage, and that was like, this is Ireland, this is cool.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have a good time here.
Yeah, I think we show our finest and probably unfiner moments on Paddy's Day, but it is certainly that global celebration of being Irish, and people like yourself pulling from however strong or loose those Irish roots might be, particularly our American friends might be listening too. They'll have that Irish heritage that brings them to calling themselves Irish on that one day in the year.
I would argue it's the one day of the year you in the centre of Dublin you hear more American accents than you do any other. So, that is definitely the case.
Yeah.
But no, it's still worth it. It's still definitely worth getting stuck in, even if only once, just to watch it the next time. So.
It's an experience. Let's just frame it that way. The next piece before we wrap up. I know many a person, whether they're a doctor or whatever it might be, coming to Ireland for the first time. A lot of people are wondering, do we all speak Irish? Do we all speak Gaelic? And I can confirm, no, we don't. But a lot of our place names, a lot of our people's names are still quite Irish in their origins. And a lot of head-scratching place names or phrases. So we thought we'd put together a piece for this season of the podcast to sort of test our international doctors' knowledge of these different things. So let me give you this one to start off with.
Oisín. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, Oisín. So an Irish male name. Try this one for size as a place name.
Oh no!
In Dublin.
I feel like I should know this. Dunleary.
Very good.
Okay.
Yes. Whew. Yeah. 2 from 2. Okay. And I feel like I'm just throwing you a bone here because you mentioned this word earlier on. But describe what this word means to you in an Irish context.
Yeah. I was going to say, I don't know that there is any sort of one word that I can compare this to. It's kind of quite interchangeable. So the word crack basically refers to fun, to kind of the sort of the latest business, or kind of what you've got up to, and kind of what's going on at that moment. But it has really sort of positive connotations, I'd say, more than anything else. And it's just used in a variety of different settings and ways.
Were you confused when you heard it first?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But to be fair, there's been a lot of names that have confused me. They still do sometimes. So, for anyone watching, at least from South Africa, there's a lot of vowels and consonants which sit next to each other, which you're not used to seeing and not pronounced the way you expect. So it takes a lot of getting used to. But crack is a good word. I feel like could be used more often internationally in different situations. It has a lot of connotations that are well summed up with it.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks so much for taking the time today, Ryan. We're gonna close on one final piece, and that is for anyone listening, wherever they are in the world, as a doctor, what one piece of advice would you give them about, if they're considering the move to Ireland?
Do it. Absolutely do it. You're going to find a lot. I'm trying to make this too long-winded, but there's going to be a lot of stuff that gets in the way that wants to. A lot of bureaucracy, a lot of people, a lot of just logistics. It's not an easy process. It's not easy establishing yourself in a new place with people you've never met, who speak with a new accent, who play sports you've never heard of, and things like that. But do it, because I think single-handedly is one of the fastest ways to develop as a person. So don't let anything stand in your way. Do it. If you're thinking about it, do it. It doesn't have to be forever. Just do it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on. And
Pleasure.
thanks for sharing your story with our listeners.
Pleasure. I hope it helps. I really do.